Good morning, world. I am Judy, your web-based therapist, making therapy accessible and convenient for our clients in Florida and New York, and of course, sharing information worldwide. Today, I want to talk about 5 risks of hyperfocus, um, and how you can manage them, of course. Because I talked about the 5 ways or 5 things you can do to try to help yourself get to a phase or a stage of hyperfocus. With hyperfocus, for those who don't know, is a state of intense concentration that people with ADHD can sometimes experience. We know, or people are familiar with the fact that ADHD often comes with a difficulty of staying on task, but hyperfocus is that phase of or that moment of super focus. So you go from difficulty focusing to super zeroed in laser focus, and that can last for quite a bit of time too. But so today we're talking about 5 risks of hyperfocus, or and how you can manage and what you need to do about them. But before we get in though, I want to take a quick moment and say, if you are subscribed, thank you. If you're already subscribed, thank you for being a subscriber. Thank you for being a part of our team. And if you are not yet subscribed, please take a moment and click the subscribe button so you can be part of our team. And make sure that you click the notification bell, because I am posting quite regularly these days, so that you can know when I post a new video and you can hopefully come watch with me. And finally, if you would like to buy one of my books, which would make me really happy, there's a link below that will take you to the website that gives you the different options so that you can buy 1 or 3 of my books. Okay, back to work. First, you want to be able to function in regular times. Hyperfocus is not something that people achieve all the time. It's not something that you do every day. And it is not something that you're always able to do, because sometimes the environment, the situation, you don't have the time. Sometimes it's just not always possible. So you want to make sure that you're continuing to work within your system, even if you're starting to be able to more regularly get into a phase of hyperfocus, that you're also still functioning outside of hyperfocus and managing and applying your system so that you're still able to function even when not in hyperfocus. 2, people in hyperfocus often forget everything else. One of the things that happens with being that so laser focused is that, everything can be happening and you forget, things like, hey, you gotta eat today. Hey, children need to be picked up after school. Those little things, when you're in hyperfocus, you can forget. So one of the ways that you can make sure you manage that is make sure that you have something to remind you. I know I mentioned it before. Make sure that you have some gentle way of reminding you to get out of hyperfocus, something that you will know, that you will notice, such as maybe a bell, but not a loud bell, but something gentle that gradually gets you out of hyperfocus and into regular, everyday, normal you day. 3, others can think that you don't care when you do things out of hyperfocus, or they may think that you're doing it on purpose because, hey, you were able to focus and sit for 3 hours and do XYZ when you were fixing that bike, when you were doing building this very exciting thing that you were super interested in. So sometimes people see that the way you operate in hyperfocus and think that, hey, if you could do that then, why aren't you doing that all the time? Why aren't you doing that now? They may not understand that hyperfocus is not an everyday thing. It's something that happens on occasion, or that you can maybe find ways to make it happen more frequently, but it's not something that happens every day. So what you do is make sure you explain it to them. Whenever somebody brings it up, whether it's your spouse or whether it's someone at work, make sure that you explain it to them, and also explain to them that when you're in hyperfocus, a lot of other things you may miss, so that if you are in hyperfocus, sometimes they may need to remind you and nudge and give you a little nudge. Hey, it's time to step out and pick up the kids. 4, negative thoughts or maybe even negative self-talk when you're not able to reach hyperfocus. Again, it's not an everyday thing. It's not something that people experience all the time. There are some things that need to be in place in order to reach hyperfocus. And there are times when even with everything in place, you still don't reach hyperfocus. don't beat yourself up. It's not an everyday thing. It's a really nice bonus that comes with that people with ADHD get, but it's not an everyday thing, and you don't have to do it every day. There will be time like you will operate like, regular normal people and do things based on a system that you have implemented. The system we always talk about. So don't give yourself a break. You don't have to be in that zone all the time. Just make sure you remember that. Hyperfocus is something that you can do, something that happens, but if it doesn't happen, you have a system, you have plans, you have things that are in place to help you still be able to function and do things in, regular you day, not hyperfocus. And finally, you're less attentive and aware of other things. This means that as you're in hyperfocus, it's almost like you take all the memory, all the energy, all the mental capacity and put it in that one activity when you're in hyperfocus. So there's little left to do other things. So that can mean that you're more susceptible to making mistakes when you try to do other things at the same time. So the best thing to do is when you are in hyperfocus, don't try to do other things. If, for instance, you notice that you're really zoned in on working on this project and then emails come in, it's okay to let the email go. It's okay to not do things at the same time. And of course, make sure that you come out of hyperfocus before you jump into the next task. Usually that is going to happen once you start switching, you do step out of that zone and you get into, regular you day. But just make sure that especially before you do anything important, make sure that you step out of the zone. Okay, so quick recap. 1, you want to be able to function in regular times too. So trying to be in hyperfocus all the time is not ideal because there will be time when hyperfocus is not possible and you want to be able to still be functional and do stuff. 2, people in hyperfocus often forget everything else. Things like picking up the kids and eating. So make sure that that you set gentle nudges, gentle reminders to get you out when you need to do important things. 3, other people may think that you don't care or that you're doing it on purpose when you do things not in hyperfocus, and maybe you stumble, maybe you make a mistake here and there, maybe you forget a few things. So make sure that you explain to people in your world that, hey, yes, there is this thing called hyperfocus and this is how it works. And I'm not always in hyperfocus. So no, I'm not doing it on purpose. That's just what's happening as I work through my system. And 4, negative thoughts that come when you're not able to get yourself to hyperfocus, when you're not experiencing hyperfocus. It's not an everyday thing. It's not like breathing that we do every day in and out. It's not. Sometimes it will happen and sometimes it's not. The good thing is you develop, you build, and you get comfortable with your system, and you'll still be able to achieve great successes with your system without hyperfocus. 5, you are less attentive and less aware of other things. So do not try to multitask. Do not try to do one thing while you are in hyperfocus, and make sure that you step out of hyperfocus before you take on anything else. As always, if you or someone you know happens to be going through something that's more than you can handle, please remember that there are professionals like myself who are available, able, and willing to help, and are even providing remote services, so that if you need them, please make sure that you reach out and get the help that you need. And that is all we have for today. Good morning, world. Have an awesome day.